Ab rollouts are the missing link in your training program, and there's one key reason why. What's up guys, Enkiri here, and today I want to talk a little bit about my favorite core exercise, the missing link in your training program, and that is the ab wheel rollout. Now, I've talked a little bit about ab wheel rollouts in the past, but not too extensively in recent history, as I had honestly sort of forgotten about them for the last several years, which was a pretty big faux pas on my part that I have since rectified over these last several months. I've begun to remaster some of these exercises that I had mastered years ago. See, I had originally started to really focus on what I would call bulletproofing my core, all the muscles that wrap around and surround my spine, back in 2016. Which was around the time I found out I had a little issue called spondylolisthesis in my lower back at L5-S1. And with that news, I decided I was going to take kind of a classic physical therapy approach to things, right? It's sort of as preventative care. I was going to make sure that the musculature that surrounds my spine was as strong as possible in order to hopefully ensure that my back and my spine would be strong, would remain strong, and would remain pain-free for years to come. And during this time frame, I took a pretty deep dive into what are known as anti-core exercises as my primary means of core training. So here I'm talking about mastering functions such as anti-rotation, which would be things like a Palloff press, anti-lateral flexion, which would be trained by things like side planks and suitcase holds or suitcase carries or suitcase deadlifts, and then perhaps most importantly of all, anti-extension, which is trained by all of the classic rollout movements. Now, these exercises are distinct from the typical core work and abdominal work that you generally see, and that the goal is not to create dynamic movement. Rather, the goal is to use force production to create core stiffness, and instead of creating movement, resisting movement. Now, I took this approach and I mastered the standing ab wheel rollout. I got all the way up to performing 10 reps in a single set from a standing position, which was a feat that I couldn't have even dreamed of when I first started on my journey, as I couldn't even perform a single negative standing rollout without collapsing onto my knees when I first got started with these exercises. And after I felt confident that I had mastered the standing rollout, I outlined the exact progression that I use to bridge that gap between kneeling rollouts and standing rollouts, which can be quite a substantial gap, quite a difficult gap to bridge. And since then, I've actually helped countless number of people, I've lost count at this point, to master this challenging but rewarding exercise, the king of all anti-extension movements, the standing ab wheel rollout. And I believe that this anti-extension in general is a very important function for us meatheads in particular to become strong in. And there is a key reason for that, and that reason is strength balance. Hey guys, if you could do me a favor and hit the like button and leave me a friendly comment down below before you leave the video, I would really appreciate it. The engagement is really helpful for my channel, so the more engagement we get, the more free, informative content I can pump out for you guys. Thanks a lot and enjoy the video. So if you think about what we all do, what all of us meatheads do all day long in the weight room, pretty much every single day, week in, week out, for years on end, we train anti-flexion of the spine. Pretty much all of us have become masters of anti-flexion because the concept of the neutral spine is, in general, considered to be one of the most important components that somebody needs to become proficient at in order to handle heavy weights efficiently and consistently and effectively. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to the fear-mongering cult that asserts that your lower back is going to explode if you lift weights with a little bit of a rounded spine, something I do myself. And I do believe there's a time and a place for things such as the Jefferson curl, aka deliberate spinal flexion under load and dynamic spinal extension. But basically, if you think about it, the vast majority of us meatheads consistently train anti-flexion repeatedly, day in and day out, via a neutral spine and a strong static contraction of the spinal erectors across a variety of different squatting and pulling exercises. But hardly any of us counterbalance this anti-flexion training with equally intense anti-extension training. And this is a damn shame, because you're leaving a big piece of the puzzle off of the table by just skipping out on this part of the equation altogether, right? We basically all can agree that learning how to keep the erector muscles rigidly extended via large degrees of force production in static contraction is an important component of weight room longevity, right? So why do we not have the same collective mindset when it comes to learning how to prevent the abdominal muscles from collapsing? If force production on one end is super important, wouldn't that concept also apply to force production on its opposite end? Would you train your quads but never train your hamstrings? Would you train your biceps but never train your triceps? And by now you're probably saying, okay, cool, Alex, strength balance, but I don't really give a shit about all that. All I want is to be jacked and tan and strong, plus I already do GHD sit-ups, bro, and this is just a waste of my training time and my energy. To which I say, maybe, but maybe not. So why actually take the time and the effort and the energy to master this exercise? In my opinion, and somebody out there is going to disagree with me and call me a nocebo and say there's no evidence to support what I'm going to say and yada, yada, yada. And that's perfectly fine, because literally everything on this channel is anecdotal anyway and based on my experiences with myself and my clients. And I've never purported otherwise, because I don't really give a shit about the exercise science research anyway, as it's basically just a superfluous circle jerk. We all already know how to improve fitness, right? I don't need a nerd in a lab coat to tell me what I already know, unless they are applying the science of enhanced physiology to these same concepts. Anyway, end tangent. So why actually take the time and the energy to master this exercise? In my opinion, health and longevity are the reason to master this movement, to master these anti-core movements and anti-extension specifically, especially as a tried and true hardcore meathead. Even if you already train dynamic spinal flexion through actions such as leg raises and sit-ups, etc., etc. Because those actions are vastly different from learning how to produce massive force in a static contraction and to learn how to avoid collapsing of the abdominal musculature under high stress or explosive conditions, something that I had started to feel myself, something that would occur occasionally myself, and I actually could feel it happening. And just as a Jefferson curl trains the erector muscles in a dynamic extension pattern out of deep flexion, and this differs greatly from a conventional deadlift, which trains the erector muscles in a position of static extension, encouraging dynamic spinal flexion through actions such as sit-ups is an entirely different action from resisting spinal extension, as in an ab rollout. And as such, the two separate movements have distinct benefits. One can be incredibly strong at sit-ups and incredibly impressive at a variety of leg raises, yet lack the ability to produce sufficient force to execute a solid standing rollout, because the type of force production is simply different. In terms of health and longevity, personally for me, the two biggest benefits that I notice when I train these anti-extension patterns intensely are that my lower back feels better in general, and my hips feel more supple and more mobile. And this idea, number two, kind of piggybacks off the video I made last week talking about the benefits of training extreme ranges of motion and how those extreme ranges of motion free up the joints of the lower body. Well, guess what? The ability to create greater core stiffness leads to more freedom in the lower body as well. Personally, I used to have chronic stiffness on the front of my hips, right? When all I did was train hip extension, but I ignored training hip flexion. And when all I did was train anti-flexion of the spine, but I ignored anti-extension of the spine. My hip flexors were so chronically stiff and tight. Every time I would walk, I would feel like I couldn't extend my leg far enough back behind me to get a good bit of power into my stride. And sometimes it was just generally uncomfortable. Sitting for extended periods of time was a big no-no, because the minute I stood up, I'd have to waddle around like Frankenstein's monster for the next 5 minutes just to be able to limber up enough to move normally. My lower back was always stiff, and it had a dull, ache in it as well. The natural spinal extension that takes place during things like an overhead press or a chin-up or a power clean or even a vertical jump began to leave my lower back feeling chronically tight and chronically sore as well. But when I take care to maintain balance across these different functions that I've been discussing, these issues all but disappear 100%. And I'm not saying that these ideas are going to work for everybody or that there is an absolute need for this for every single trainee or anything absolutist like that. But I am saying that if you do struggle with any of the issues that I've talked about today, or even something similar to that, then that probably is a pretty good reason to give a theory like this an earnest shot and start working on your strength balance across the different functions that I've outlined here today and begin the process of bulletproofing your core with these anti-core training movements, those anti-extension and standing ab wheel rollouts really being the king of the crop in that regard. I have brought banged up meatheads back from the dead with these ideas, guys. But hell, man, maybe you don't give a shit about doing this 5 or 10 years from now. But if you really do want to actually get as jacked and strong as possible, or even just as jacked as possible, then it would behoove you to be able to hit the weights hard for many years to come. And a part of that, a big part of that, is going to be feeling good inside of your body so that you are actually capable of doing the work that needs to be done in order to achieve that and doing that work consistently. And hell, even then, even if you were capable of getting jacked out of your fucking gills while ignoring what I would consider to be these vital but undertrained and underappreciated function, what difference does it really make at the end of the day if you're always too damn stiff and too damn sore outside of the gym to do anything with it? And for me, that in and of itself is a good enough reason to include these kinds of exercises and master things like the standing ab wheel rollout, which is the focal point of today's video, because again, it really is just the king of anti-extension exercises. If you can get to a point where you're a master of the standing rollout, then your core musculature is most likely sufficiently strong enough to create the balance that we are looking for in this part of the equation. And if you need some ideas about how to bridge that difficult gap from kneeling to standing, which can be quite substantial and quite a large gap to bridge, please check out my video, How to Master the Standing Ab Wheel Rollout, where I outline the original progression that I used 7 years ago now to first master this difficult but rewarding exercise. And before I close here, I will say that the only caveat with these anti-core exercises, which while very good for bulletproofing the core, they are not very good for creating hypertrophy in the abdominal musculature. Hypertrophy is still mostly a function of repeated lengthening and shortening. That is, you need both an eccentric phase and a concentric phase. You need that dynamic movement to take place in order for hypertrophy to really occur. So you will still need to include spinal flexion movements in your training program if you want your abs to get thick and to really pop. But from a performance and longevity perspective, I'm always going to lean towards these anti-core movements as being priority number one. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found it informative. If you did find it helpful, please be sure to share it around and spread the good word. Remember to smash the like button before you go. Leave me some love in the comments down below. Check out EnkiriFitness.com for online coaching and training programs. And as always, keep training hard. I will catch you guys next time.